She was just walking home from school when the world suddenly cracked open, revealing its sharp edges. Nobody expects to see a hit and run at 8 years old, especially not in a quiet little town like Larks Ridge, where porch lights stay on as a welcome and neighbors still wave from their trucks. But that October Tuesday, as the wind twirled through copper leaves and the pines murmured secrets only old trees could hold, little Ellie Monroe witnessed something that would alter her life, and maybe save another. She had taken the long way home intentionally, the path that curved along Maple Hollow Road, past the pumpkin stand and the vacant lot where volunteer firefighters sometimes trained. Her boots crunched over a patchwork of fallen leaves, her backpack bouncing with each step. Beside her, loyal and deliberate, walked her best friend, Bolt, a retired German shepherd. Bolt wasn't just a dog, he was muscle, memory, and quiet magic wrapped in fur. His muzzle had grown gray over the past year, and a limp from an old canyon rescue slowed his gait, but his eyes were sharp, alive, and all-seeing. "Come on, buddy," Ellie whispered, patting her thigh. "Race you to the curve." Bolt snorted, unconvinced. Racing wasn't his duty. Protecting her was. As they rounded the familiar curve, the one with the broken fence and a rust-eaten road sign, Bolt stopped abruptly. Up ahead, a police cruiser sat with hazard lights blinking a soft orange. Next to it stood a tall man in uniform, scribbling on a clipboard. Officer Grant Taylor. Ellie remembered him from school safety day, the kind officer who had let her try on his hat. She raised a hand to wave. Then it hit. First came the roar, a furious engine, ripping through the trees. Tires screamed as a red pickup truck hurtled around the far bend. Headlights off, aimed straight at the cruiser. Officer Taylor barely glanced up. "Hey," Ellie shouted. The truck didn't slow. It didn't veer. It struck Officer Taylor like a battering ram, slamming him against the side of the cruiser with a gut-wrenching metallic crash. He collapsed onto the asphalt, limp, papers scattering into the wind like frightened white birds. The truck vanished in 3 seconds, swallowed by the forest road, leaving only scorched rubber and stunned silence. For a long, frozen moment, no one moved. Then Ellie dropped her backpack and ran. "Bolt, stay!" She yelled over her shoulder, but Bolt was already ahead, barking and snarling, tail rigid as an arrow. When they reached Officer Taylor, he was unconscious, blood pooling beneath his shoulder. His hand twitched once, then went still. Ellie gasped, struggling to recall her dad's instructions for emergencies. She looked down at Bolt. He growled low, ears pricked forward. "Go get Dad," Ellie urged. Bolt didn't hesitate. He turned and sprinted toward the woods, heading home. Half a mile away, in a cabin scented with fresh coffee and pine sap, Noah Monroe stood barefoot in the kitchen, scrolling through rescue case files. He was on medical leave, torn rotator cuff, stubborn as sin, and loathed every second of it. The only upside was more time with Ellie and Bolt. The door slammed open. "Dad! Dad!" Ellie's voice cut through the air like lightning. "What?" Noah spun around, his mug slipping and shattering on the tile. "Officer Taylor, the truck hit him." "He's not moving." Noah didn't waste a second. Grabbing his old medic bag, slinging it over his good shoulder, he bolted outside. Bolt was already bounding through the brush. They found Grant exactly where Ellie had left him, uniform soaked in blood, breathing shallow. "Stay back," Noah ordered, kneeling beside him. "Ellie, stay with Bolt." He checked the carotid artery, still there, barely. Grant's chest rose and fell in ragged gasps. A gash ran across his temple, his arm bent unnaturally. Noah's training took over. Stabilize the neck, open the airway, pack the bleeding. Bolt sat alert, eyes fixed on the empty road, ears twitching at every sound. "Hang in there, brother. Help's coming," Noah muttered. 10 minutes later, red and white lights pierced the trees, sirens wailing like wolves through the valley. Paramedics loaded Grant into the ambulance. Ellie stood beside Bolt, cheeks streaked with tears and dirt. "I remember the plate," she whispered. Noah knelt, gripping her hand. "Say it again." "The license plate. It had a Z and a J." Noah stared at her as if she had handed him a key to a hidden treasure. If your chest is tight reading this, you're not alone. This is Animal Heroes, where dogs like Bolt prove that courage comes on 4 legs. Hit subscribe to follow their journey. What happens next will astonish you. That night, rain tapped softly on the cabin roof. Ellie curled on the couch under a blanket, Bolt at her feet. Noah stood at the window, phone pressed to his ear. "Sheriff Ross." "It wasn't an accident," he said. The woman on the line, Sheriff Malene Ross, late 50s, voice steel gray, didn't question him. He wasn't hit by chance. Noah continued. That truck aimed, no brake marks, no hesitation. We'll find them, she promised. Even as she spoke, Noah felt a shift, a weight moving through the dark woods. Bolt growled from the doorway. Boy, Noah muttered, flicking the porch light on and stepping outside. Beyond the tree line, headlights blinked once, then vanished. Someone was watching. They thought it was over. A coward's hit and run. But Ellie, Bolt, and Noah didn't know the truth. No one in Larksboro Ridge could have guessed. This wasn't just about an officer on the road. It was about a secret buried deep in the mountains. A crime so old it wore a badge. And a girl and her dog who had seen too much. Rain whispered against the cabin long after midnight, soaking the forest floor with mud and pine needles. Inside, the living room glowed under lamplight. Ellie sat curled on the couch, blanket draped over her shoulders. Bolt snored softly at her feet. The smell of antiseptic and cold coffee lingered. Noah paced by the window, phone pressed to his ear. He's stable, said Sheriff Ross. Unconscious, severe concussion, fractured clavicle, internal bruising. Sedated for now. Noah exhaled, rubbing his face. It wasn't just a hit and run. I know, Ross said. No skid marks, no hesitation. That truck was lined up like a target. A pause. Treat it like attempted murder. Deputies are canvassing the trail. Noah's eyes drifted to the tree line through rain-streaked glass. We need to know who's behind this. We will, Ross promised. Anne Monroe. Keep your daughter close. If she saw even part of that plate, someone may want to make sure she forgets it. By morning, rain had thinned to mist. Pale gold light filtered through clouds, brushing treetops with silver. Ellie stood at the window in her pajamas, tracing circles on the condensation. Bolt sat beside her, ears twitching at every sound outside. You think Officer Taylor's awake now? She whispered. Noah set a cup of warm milk beside her. Maybe not yet, he said gently. But the doctors say he's fighting. Ellie gave a small nod, then buried her face in Bolt's thick fur. The dog let out a soft chuff, nudging her shoulder with his snout. They had seen something terrible, but for children, the line between fear and responsibility is thinner than most imagine. Ellie had crossed that line, and now her father had too. That afternoon, Noah drove his old Silverado down into town to speak with the sheriff. The small department building sat across from the general store, flanked by 2 battered patrol cruisers and a few folding chairs left out in the rain. Inside, Sheriff Ross stood by a bulletin board, cluttered with trail maps and sticky notes. She handed Noah a manila folder. Partial plates, she said. This is EJ4 as a start. We cross-checked registrations. 5 older red Silverados within a 50-mile radius. Only 2 are local. One's in a garage halfway up Copper Ridge. Belongs to Dylan Cross. A mechanic, real backwoods type. No criminal record, but a few complaints for trespassing and odd behavior. He moved here about 6 months ago. Lives alone. Noah glanced at a blurry surveillance printout. The truck shape matched. The tailgate dent exactly as Ellie remembered. Are you going to bring him in? He asked. Not yet, Ross replied. No probable cause. We're watching him. Noah frowned. We don't have time to watch. My kid's involved. You saw the blood. I'm doing everything I can, Ross said, meeting his gaze. Outside, thunder rumbled. Later that evening, warm by the fireplace, Noah returned to find Ellie at the table, crayon in hand. She'd drawn Bolt wearing a big red cape, Officer Taylor standing beside him holding an ice pack to his head. I'm making him a hero picture, she explained softly. For when he wakes up! Noah smiled and kissed her hair. He'll love that, Bolt barked once from the front door. Bathroom? Ellie asked, but the bark was sharp, alert, focused. Noah opened the door cautiously. The porch creaked under his boots. Cold air rushed in. The forest was unnaturally still. Noah followed them to the edge of the woods,
trees, stepping
where they
onto the
disappeared
gravel
near
path.
the creek bed. Then he saw them. He crouched,
Fresh tire
flashlight
tracks,
in hand,
thin and sharp,
spotting a
pressed
jagged
into the
scrap
mud
of metal
just beyond
half
the
buried
fence.
in mud.
The same brand Sheriff
Brushing
Ross
it
had
clean,
mentioned.
he saw chipped red paint, the same color as the truck that hit Officer Taylor. He didn't wait. He called the sheriff. By the time Ross arrived with a deputy and forensics tech, the cabin yard looked like a crime scene. Bolt paced in circles, growling low. Ross examined the scrap with gloved fingers. Same paint code, mid-2000 Silverado. That's a match. And the tracks? Noah asked. Deep tread off-road tires, she replied. We're working on a match to Dylan Cross's vehicle. If we get a judge's sign-off, we'll tow it tonight. Noah rubbed his temple. Why would he come back here? Ross looked toward the woods. To intimidate your daughter, or find out how much she saw. Inside, Ellie sat quietly on the couch, hugging Bolt like a pillow. When Ross entered, she crouched beside her. Ellie, you've done a very brave thing, she said gently. I need you to promise me something, okay? Ellie looked up. Don't tell anyone else about the paint. Not your friends, not your teacher, not even your cousins. Ellie nodded solemnly. I promise. Ross patted her knee. Good girl. That night, long after Ellie went to bed, Noah sat at the kitchen table, eyes fixed on the front door. A hunting flashlight rested beside his coffee mug. Bolt lay near the fireplace but kept glancing toward the windows. The phone rang once, making him jump. He lifted the receiver. Hello? Static? Then a woman's voice, low, hollow, mechanical. Mr. Monroe, your daughter saw something. She needs to forget it. The line went dead. Noah gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles whitened. Bolt rose, muscles coiled, growling a deep warning from his belly. Noah flicked off the light. Outside, fog rolled in over the pines like a thick wave. Just beyond the trees, a flicker of orange, the glow of a cigarette. Someone was watching. The next morning, frost coated the grass and the sun rose slowly. Sheriff Ross returned with news. A judge had signed the warrant. They would impound Dylan Cross's truck. But Dylan was already gone. His tools, half-eaten food, and a stack of unpaid bills remained. But the truck was gone. Maybe he's on the run, Ross said. Or circling, Noah replied. You think he'll come back? I know he will. Inside the hospital, Grant Taylor stirred for the first time in 4 days. His eyelids fluttered against the bright light. Everything hurt, ribs, shoulder, skull. He tried to sit up and winced. A nurse called the sheriff. An hour later, Ross stood beside his bed, recorder in hand. You awake enough to talk? Grant nodded slowly. A little. What's the last thing you remember? He blinked at the ceiling. Red truck, no lights. I heard the engine before I saw it. Was it random? Grant paused. No. I saw that truck before. Parked by the ridge 2 nights in a row. Headlights off. I thought it was just another poacher. Ross frowned. You think he was watching you? I think I was the warm-up, Grant said. She showed him the scrap of red paint they'd found behind the Monroe property. Grant exhaled. They're not done yet. Ross nodded. And neither are we. That morning, the first thing Ellie noticed was the quiet. Not the peaceful kind filled with birdsong and wind through the trees. No, the kind that comes just before something goes wrong, as if the woods were holding their breath. Bolt stood stiff at the back door, ears forward, tail straight. The moment Ellie reached for her cereal bowl, he growled. Bolt, she whispered. He didn't move. In the kitchen, Noah was lacing his boots, scheduled to meet Sheriff Ross to review the paint chip and tire tracks. But when he saw Bolt's posture, he paused. Something's wrong. Then he caught it too. A faint but unmistakable smell of gasoline. Noah's pulse quickened. He moved slowly to the window, peering through the fog. Fresh tire prints on the gravel, clear and sharp. And further down by the tree line, shadows that didn't belong to trees. A figure, standing perfectly still, watching the house from behind a pine. Noah didn't hesitate. He grabbed the flashlight from the cabinet and flung open the door. Hey! He shouted. The figure turned and melted into the fog. Noah sprinted across the wet yard, boots slipping in mud. By the forest's edge, there was nothing, only mist and the faint sound of an engine fading into the distance. He turned back, chest heaving. Bolt stood at the doorway, motionless, eyes fixed on the woods. 10 miles away, a battered red truck sat behind a long-abandoned gas station. The windshield was smeared with rain, wipers broken and useless. Inside, Dylan Cross chewed a toothpick, tapping a burner phone against the steering wheel. He hadn't slept. His eyes were hollow, jaw working like a man grinding his own teeth to dust. He checked the message again. The girl saw the plate. She had to be silenced. Dylan flicked the toothpick aside and lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. Outside, rain began falling harder. "I didn't sign up for kids," he muttered. From the passenger seat, another phone buzzed. He picked it up. A calm, measured, older voice rasped through the speaker. "Report." I went back. "The kid is still talking. She saw me." A pause. "You know what needs to happen." Dylan's fingers trembled. "Rick." The line went dead. That evening, Ellie drew at the kitchen table while Noah pored over old rescue logs. Every creak of the cabin made her flinch. Bolt never left her side. "I don't like how the woods feel today," she whispered. Noah looked up. "What do you mean?" "They're watching," she said. Bolt lifted his head and let out a low rumble. Noah set down his pen. "You're not wrong." By morning, the mist coated the porch in dew. Noah headed into town, stopping by Sheriff Ross's office with a tire print sample and the photo of the paint chip they'd pulled from the creek bed. Ross was already on edge. The surveillance. "Cameras behind the evidence depot were disabled last night," she said. "Right before the fire started." Noah blinked. "What fire?" "The old depot," Ross explained. "Overflow case files, body cam backups, dash cam footage, vehicle impound records. All gone. Looks like someone was erasing evidence." Outside, sirens wailed as fire trucks returned from dousing the ruins. Smoke still curled over the roofline of the smoldering building. Ross rubbed her eyes. "Everything from Taylor's cruiser, dash cams, citation logs, accident photos, gone, torched." Meanwhile, Ellie sat on the school swing next to Mason Keller, a quiet boy with red hair and scuffed sneakers. His grandpa ran a scrapyard at the base of Cedar Ridge. "I heard my grandpa talking last night," Mason whispered. "He said he used to work with a guy named Rick Danton. Real shady, paid cash, kept odd hours." Ellie's eyes widened. "He said Rick paid him to hide a wrecked truck years ago, red Silverado. Really beat up." "Where?" she asked. "Some old repair shop near the mountain trail. Nobody goes there anymore. Roof caved in, vines over the door. Grandpa says it's cursed." Bolt, who had followed her to school and waited by the fence, barked once, as if he didn't like the sound of that place either. That night, Sheriff Ross pulled up to the Monroe cabin just before sunset. Garage where the paint her cruiser kicked up leaves and dust as she climbed out, flashlight in one hand, folder under the other. Noah stepped onto the porch. Noah asked. Ellie stood behind the screen door. Inside, Ellie held her breath. She wasn't supposed to hear this, but she already knew the truth, and so did Bolt. Later that night, the wind howled, and the fire in the stove had died down. Noah sat awake with a mug of cold tea, staring at the photo Ross had left behind. Rick Danton, ex-sergeant once decorated, now missing, possibly running a smuggling ring through Larks Ridge. Bolt rose from the rug, eyes locked on the window. Noah followed his gaze. Fog again, but this time it wasn't empty. Through the trees just beyond the fence, a slow, deliberate silhouette moved. A flashlight beam flicked once, then vanished. Noah didn't turn off the porch light. He walked to the cabinet, retrieved the revolver he hadn't touched in 5 years, and loaded it. "I see you," he whispered. The next morning, Sheriff Ross called. "We just intercepted something," she said. "A signal pinged off a burner phone we've been tracking. Location matches a cabin near Cedar Ridge. Looks like Danton and Cross are holed up there." "Are you going in tonight?" Noah asked. "I'll need you on standby," Ross replied. "If they move through your woods again, I want eyes on them." Noah agreed. But even as he hung up, his gut twisted. Something felt off. Back at school, Mason Keller didn't show up for recess. Ellie waited on the swings, scanning the fence where he usually met her with trail mix or pocketfuls of stories. The yard stayed quiet. At dinner, she told her dad he wouldn't just skip. "He said he had something to show me," Noah said, trying to reassure her. But deep down, he felt it too. Just before midnight, a deputy's truck screamed into the Monroe driveway. Noah opened the door barefoot, shirt half buttoned. "Mason Keller's missing," the deputy gasped. His grandpa says 2 men dragged him into a van about an hour ago. No plates, no trail. Ellie's hand flew to her mouth. No, he was just my friend. He didn't do anything. Noah grabbed his boots.
Ellie, stay here.
Don't open the door. Not for anyone, Bolt growled at the storm rolling in from the ridge. Ellie looked down at him.
He's in trouble, Bolt. We have to do something.
The dog didn't bark. He just turned to the door and waited. By nightfall, rain returned, heavier this time, slanting sideways in the wind that rattled the old porch swing. Thunder growled deep in the valley like something ancient stirring from sleep. Inside the cabin, Ellie stood at the front window, socks cold on the floor. Bolt pressed to her side like a shadow. Her little hands trembled against the glass. Her friend was missing. Noah paced behind her, radio in hand, eyes fixed on a trail map spread across the kitchen table. He had circled the area around Cedar Ridge in red, marking the old garage, the ravine trail, and the fire road where the tire tracks first appeared. His voice was sharp, clipped. Yes, Sheriff, I understand. I'll be ready to move. He set the radio down and turned to Ellie. You're staying here.
No,
she shot back, voice rising. He's my friend. And Bolt, he can find him. I know he can. Noah crouched in front of her, soaked in guilt, frustration, and fear. Sweetheart, I don't doubt that. But this isn't a game. These men, they're dangerous. Bolt lifted his head, ears cocked, as if to say, so am I. Meanwhile, at the sheriff's field command post, a long canvas tent flapped in the wind near the trailhead. Portable lights cut cold beams through the tree line as deputies moved between maps, thermal scopes, and tracking gear. Sheriff Malene Ross stood at the center, arms folded, rain streaking her jacket. Cole Jennings, she said, nodding to the bruised, limping man leaning on a cane beside her. We intercepted a signal from Cross's burner here, she tapped the map, just west of the old repair station. Cole studied the rain-streaked windshield of the cruiser. That ridge road's narrow. They'll have to move fast if they plan to relocate. Won't risk daylight. We move in before dawn, Ross said. Thunder cracked overhead, rattling the tent. If they've got the Keller kid, they won't keep him long, Cole added, Ross's jaw set colder than fear. She looked toward the ridge. This ends tonight. Back at the Monroe cabin, the lights flickered once, then went out completely. The TV went dark. The radio clicked off. Silence fell, broken only by the wind rattling the shutters. Noah lit the emergency lantern from the pantry, casting a dim, warm glow across the kitchen. Ellie stood in the doorway, arms crossed tight. Dad, she said softly, what if they come here again? They won't, he assured her. Even as he said it, Bolt rose stiffly, ears pointed to the back door. Tail stopped wagging. A low rumble built in his chest. Noah grabbed the flashlight. When he opened the door, wind slapped his face, carrying something sharper than rain. Smoke. At that same moment, Dylan Cross paced inside the burned-out garage, now a hideout turned prison. His nerves were fraying. Where the hell is Rick? He muttered, rubbing his face. We weren't supposed to grab the kid. This wasn't the plan. In the corner, Mason Keller sniffled through a gag, tied to a metal pipe with frayed rope. Dylan knelt beside him. I didn't want to do this, kid. Really didn't, but you were talking too much. Heard things your grandpa shouldn't have said. The boy whimpered. The back door slammed open. Rick Danton stepped in, soaked head to toe in black rain gear. His face was cut from stone, emotionless, save for a flicker of rage along his jawline. Still haven't left? Dylan asked nervously. Rick didn't answer. He walked to the table, set down a duffel bag, and unzipped it. Inside cash, phones, a pistol. Time to shut it down, Rick said. We're done playing nice. But as the storm raged outside, another force was already moving. In the shadows of the trail north of the garage, Bolt pressed his nose to the mud. Rain flattened his coat, but he moved with laser focus. Ellie followed a few steps behind, raincoat too big, heart pounding. She had slipped out while Noah checked the breaker box. He had left the back door unlocked. I know we're not supposed to, she whispered to Bolt, but I can feel him. He's out there. He's scared. Bolt barked once and broke into a trot. 2 minutes later, Noah discovered the back door swinging in the wind. Ellie! He roared. Bolt! No answer. Only trees and darkness. He grabbed his jacket, flashlight, and old paramedic satchel. His truck fishtailed on the muddy road as he peeled out toward Cedar Ridge. He didn't call Ross. He didn't have time. Back near the garage, Rick was loading the truck when he paused. He heard it, a short, sharp bark close. He ducked low, eyes scanning the fog. "What was that?" Dylan asked. Rick said nothing. He motioned for Dylan to check the trail. Dylan stepped outside, squinting into the storm. Bolt exploded from the underbrush, a blur of muscle and fury, clamping his jaws around Dylan's arm. Dylan screamed, staggering backward as Bolt dragged him into the mud. From the tree line, Ellie rushed in.
Mason!
She sprinted to her friend, fumbling at the ropes with shaking hands. Rick spun toward the noise, but it was too late. Noah crashed through the opposite door, flashlight beams slicing across the garage. "Let her go," he roared. Rick reached for his pistol. Noah tackled him first. The two slammed into the workbench, sending tools clattering across the cement. The pistol skidded away. Bolt let go of Dylan and planted a heavy paw on the weapon. Dylan scrambled out the side door, clutching his bleeding arm. Ellie yanked the gag from Mason's mouth. "Are you okay?" she asked. He nodded, crying. Noah stood, bruised but unbroken. He grabbed the gun from under Bolt's paw and trained it on Rick. "You never should have come back here," he said. Rick gave a twisted grin. "Neither should your daughter." Minutes later, red and blue lights strobing through the trees announced Sheriff Ross's team had arrived. Deputies poured into the garage. Rick was cuffed. Mason was lifted into a rescue truck. Ellie clung to Bolt, who shook from adrenaline but wagged his tail like a soldier returning home. Ross approached Noah, eyes wide. "How did you find them?" "I didn't," he said. "She did." Ross crouched in front of Ellie. "You're one tough kid. He was my friend." "I couldn't just wait," Ellie said. Ross nodded. "Neither could I." As dawn broke over Larks Ridge, rain gave way to light. Trees dripped silver. Mud steamed in the morning sun. Ellie sat in the back of the rescue truck, Mason beside her, both wrapped in blankets. Stood beside the
Bolt
truck,
lay at her feet,
watching the
muzzle
sky
muddy,
turn pink,
tail
behind
wagging
the mountains.
softly.
He had no doubt.
"I told you he'd find us,"
but deep in his
she
gut,
whispered.
he knew this wasn't the
Mason
last
smiled
they'd hear
through
from
his
Rick
bruises.
Danton or
"He's the best
whoever had
dog
sent
ever."
him. Something darker was still out there, watching, waiting. The storm had passed, but the air smelled of smoke. A thin haze clung to Larks Ridge, ghost-like, as red and blue lights faded from memory. Back at the cabin, Ellie sat wrapped in a blanket on the worn couch, legs tucked beneath her holding a mug of untouched cocoa. Bolt lay at the hearth, breathing slow and steady, damp fur flecked with pine needles never leaving her side. Noah stood at the kitchen sink, staring out the window. He hadn't said much since returning. "You think they'll come back?" Ellie asked softly. He turned slowly, drying his hands with a dish towel already dry. "No," he said. "Not them. But maybe someone else?" She pressed. He nodded. "Maybe." By mid-morning, Sheriff Ross pulled up in her cruiser, looking like she hadn't slept, and she hadn't. Her uniform shirt was wrinkled. Her thermos smelled of reheated coffee. Inside, Noah had cleared the table, laying out a small pile of evidence, photographs, a bent license plate fragment, a burner phone, and the cracked shell of a GPS unit found in Rick Danton's truck. "He had backup," Ross said bluntly. "Coded messages on that phone, someone feeding him intel. Timing, patrol shifts, evidence depot locations." Noah crossed his arms. "You think it was someone in your department?" Ross didn't flinch. "Someone with a badge helped cover this up." Ellie, listening quietly from the hallway, felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. "So, what now?" Noah asked. "We dig," Ross said quietly. "Carefully. The minute we go loud, whoever's left will scatter." Noah glanced at the map pinned to the fridge, red thumbtacks still marking the garage, the fire road, the crime scenes. And if they came after his daughter again, Ross's jaw clenched. They wouldn't. I'll see to that. Later that afternoon, Officer Grant Taylor sat propped against two pillows, shoulder bandaged, ribs taped, the room smelling of iodine and old linoleum. He hadn't seen daylight in 5 days. Sheriff Ross stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "I hear you've been asking for me," she said. Grant gave a rough nod, voice gravelly. "Didn't think I'd wake up." Ross pulled up a chair. "But you did." "I remember more now," he said. "Before the crash, I got an anonymous email. Told me to stop digging into Cedar Lane. Said someone on the inside was watching. You tell anyone?" Ross asked. "I forwarded it to Internal Affairs, but the server went down 2 hours later. The whole chain disappeared." She cursed under her breath. Grant leaned forward, voice sharpening. "And get this, Before I blacked out, I saw someone behind the truck. Not Cross, not Danton. A third guy, wearing a deputy's jacket. Ross didn't blink. A name? No, just a patch. Cooper, she stood. There's no Deputy Cooper in my department. Grant frowned. Then someone's wearing our skin. Back at the cabin, Ellie sat outside with Bolt, watching the wind swirl the leaves. Fall had arrived in earnest. The maples a fiery mix of red and orange, the air crisp with winter's promise. That afternoon, Mason Keller arrived with his grandfather. He still sported a bruise on his cheek and a butterfly bandage on his forehead, but his grin was wide. "Brought someone to see you?" Mason said. Ellie leapt up. "You're okay?" He nodded. "Doctor said I just need rest." They went behind the cabin to their favorite log near the creek, Bolt lying nearby. "My grandpa's fixing up the old garage," Mason said. "Wants it to be a real shop again. Doesn't want bad things to be the last memory there." Ellie looked at him. "You going to help?" Mason puffed out his chest. "I'm in charge of the wrench wall." They laughed, and for the first time in days it felt like being kids again. That night, the town held a small ceremony in the old town hall. Simple folding chairs, store-bought donuts, and a banner reading, "Thank you for your bravery." Noah didn't want to go, but Ellie asked, so he said yes. Inside, Sheriff Ross gave a short speech. Grant Taylor, walking with a cane, was recognized for his service. Mason received quiet applause when Ellie and Bolt were called to the front. The room rose. "Heroes come in all shapes," Ross said, "and sometimes they have 4 legs." She handed Ellie a certificate and clipped a small medallion to Bolt's collar. Bolt sniffed it, then sneezed. The room laughed. Afterward, Ellie and her dad walked home through the chilly dusk. She held his hand tighter than usual. "You did good tonight," Noah said. "Bolt did better," she replied. "He always does." A few days later, while cleaning the attic, Noah found an old radio from his search and rescue days. The batteries were swollen, but the memory remained. He dusted it off, flipped it open, and checked the frequency logs. One channel, the same used by the sheriff's department, had a strange jump in signal. Encrypted ping. Same time the depot burned. He called Ross immediately. "I think they're using this frequency to relay orders." "Are you sure?" She answered within 2 rings. Noah relayed the pattern. She recognized it instantly. "That's from the old ranger district. The fire tower that collapsed 2 years ago still has a repeater active. Nobody's checked it since the floods. Then we just found their signal hub." 2 nights later, Ross, Noah, and a small tactical team moved up the fire trail under cover of darkness. Bolt stayed home. Ellie made him promise. The tower loomed like a skeleton on the ridge, half-rotted and rust-covered, yet still humming with faint electrical energy. Inside the control room, they found both what they hoped for and feared, a backup hard drive and a printed ledger. The hard drive contained encrypted files, shipment routes, drop points, officer shift logs. The ledger was worse. Names, officers, contractors, medical transporters. A paper trail stretching nearly 4 years. At the top of the list, Danton. Cross and a third, W. Briggs. Ross froze. "My brother," she whispered. Noah looked at her. "Your brother was part of this?" She nodded slowly. "We haven't spoken in years. He left the force, disappeared. Looks like he didn't get far enough." Back at the Monroe cabin, Ellie dreamed of forests on fire, red trucks, ash drifting down like slow snow. In her sleep, Bolt lifted his head and stared out the window. His eyes flashed amber in the moonlight. Beyond the trees, a shadow shifted, slow, deliberate, then melted back into the woods. Bolt rose and let out a single, low growl. The first frost of the season kissed Larks Ridge the next morning. Grass glittered like crushed glass under the pale sun, and the creek behind the cabin steamed where cold met moving water. From the kitchen window, Noah watched a squirrel scam the deck railing, then stopped when Bolt padded into view. The dog didn't bark. He simply stood, steady, watching the tree line the way he did when something was wrong. Something in the mountain had shifted. Not weather, not season, but something deeper. At the sheriff's office, Ross sat in the back room with the recovered ledger splayed across her desk. Coffee went cold in a chipped mug beside her. Officer Grant Taylor flipped through the scanned hard drive files with slow, surgical care. "This isn't just local," he murmured. "Shipments routed through Denver, Nashville, even Tulsa." Ross's eyes stayed glued to one name halfway down the list. "Wendell Briggs, her brother." He hadn't been seen since 2020, after a disciplinary review. No calls returned, no retirement filed. The family had assumed he'd vanished to Arizona. The ledger told a different story. He wasn't merely involved, he was coordinating. Then we need to move fast, Taylor said. Before word leaks, before they disappear. Ross shut the ledger. I know where he is, she said. Back at the cabin, Ellie sat cross-legged on the floor beside Bolt, using an old toothbrush to pick pine sap from his coat. Mason had just left after stacking firewood. Late afternoon sun slanted through the trees. Dad, she asked suddenly. That evening, Ross drove alone to a rundown fishing cabin by Lake Walker. Noah looked up from the wood registered in years. The question landed like a cold blue tarp, a shutter hanging by one hinge. They forget what matters most. Yet a truck sat outside, he said. Like gray 2005 Dodge Ram. He nodded. Arkansas plates. Then what if they remember inside again? A low fire burned. Then maybe they find their way back. Looked older than his Noah years. Replied. Beard flecked with gray. Skeptical. Boots worn through at the heels. Malene, he said without turning. Aw, didn't expect you. You always liked cabins more than cities, she answered, letting the screen door click shut behind her. They're quieter. She dropped the ledger on the table. Tell me you were stupid, she said. He didn't look surprised. You think this was about money? He asked. I think it was about pride, Wendell admitted. After I got pushed out, no pension, no benefits, I was angry. Then Rick came along, said we could put our skills to use. Use? Ross snapped. You were smuggling narcotics and intercepting medical shipments. You were stealing from people who needed help. Wendell rose. I didn't plan to hurt anyone. You did, she said. Silence settled between them. Ross sighed. We need you to testify. If you won't... She let the threat hang. Maybe I deserve that, Wendell said, looking away. The next morning, Ross brought Wendell back through the rear entrance of the station. No cuffs, no press. Just quiet, careful procedure for messes the public didn't need to see. Grant watched through the blinds, arms folded. You sure about this? He asked. She'll give us the rest of the names, Ross said. What's left of their network? According to Wendell, 2 final shipments were due through the county within 72 hours. After that, the trail went cold. New routes, new fronts. Then we stop it here. Ross picked up the radio. Let's call Noah. That evening, Noah met the task force at a small cabin near the fire breaks, an old ranger outpost he had once used during a mountain rescue. The location offered a clear view of the service road and a hidden trail behind the ridge. Ross laid out the plan. 2 trucks expected, 1 decoy, 1 carrying nearly $4 million in pharmaceuticals. They would use the decoy to trace the route and let the main team intercept the real cargo. Bolt paced the perimeter, alert and restless, as if he already understood. Ellie had stayed behind with Mason and his grandfather, safe, tucked away. But her words still echoed in Noah's mind. What if they remember again? As night fell, headlights pierced the ridge fog. 2 trucks rolled into view right on schedule. Ross radioed the checkpoint. Target confirmed. Hold until visual on the second vehicle. The first truck passed. Then the second, older and unmarked, veered down the service trail exactly as Wendell had predicted. Go, Ross commanded. Noah and 2 deputies moved fast, headlights off, bouncing over rocks and mud. They intercepted the truck at the clearing where the bridge had washed out the previous year. Inside, 2 men, a firearm in one hand, a tablet displaying live customer locations in the other, froze. They didn't resist, not when Bolt leapt into the cab, snarling like thunder, nor when Ross's voice boomed from behind, Get on the ground! By the next day at the station, boxes of seized medication lined the evidence room shelves. Files were logged, inventory checked. In the break room, Ross sat with Noah, Grant, and Wendell, who now wore a visitor's badge. It's over, Grant said. Ross shook her head. Not yet. Noah looked up. What's missing? Ross pulled out a thumb drive. Wendell told me there was one last name he was too scared to write down, someone who made the whole operation possible. Someone above us. She inserted the drive into the laptop and played a short audio clip. If anyone gets curious, you send them down the old logging trail. By the time they figure it's a ghost run, the real products are in the next county. We own Larks Ridge. The sheriff doesn't even know where to look. It was Rick Danton's voice, but he wasn't speaking to Wendell. Another voice answered, male, confident, controlled, and local. Noah leaned in. Someone's still out there, he said. Ross nodded. This story's not done. Later that week, Ellie sat under the big oak by the creek with Bolt, braiding a piece of yarn into his collar. "You always find the trail," she whispered. Bolt huffed once, almost as if to say, "That's what I do." Behind them, the wind rustled through the fallen leaves. The storm had passed. The air was clean, but never quiet for long. By the time frost arrived and the leaves were gone, the town believed the worst was over. Trucks were seized, arrests made, headlines declared a major regional bust. The woods felt lighter. The silence was peaceful, the kind that made people believe in second chances. But for Noah Monroe, the weight hadn't lifted. One voice from the audio file, the man Rick Danton reported to, remained unidentified. He knew something Ellie didn't. Those who orchestrate shadows rarely step into the light. Weeks of interviews, cross-agency briefings, and evidence logs kept Ross at the station more than her own home. Yet one line Wendell shared haunted her. The man they call Red Cap. He's not just funding it, he's pulling strings across counties. Red Cap had known patrol schedules before deputies left the station. They ran every name: contractors, former deputies, transport managers, but the voice didn't match any of them. Then, Wendell remembered something critical. A dry, constant cough, like dust trapped in the lungs. That led Ross and Noah to a retired logistics officer, Halden Keyes. Halden had once worked out of a forestry depot near Pine Hollow. Medically retired 6 years ago after a suspected wildfire injury, he kept to himself in a modest house on the county's edge. No one gave it a second thought. But when Ross cross-checked his name with fuel purchases and burner phone records, the connections lined up too neatly to ignore. The sun had barely cleared the ridge when Ross and Grant Taylor approached Halden's property in a government SUV. Pine needles littered the driveway. A rusted "Beware of Dog" sign hung crookedly on the fence, though no dog had been there for years. Halden answered the door before they could knock. Thin white hair, stiff hands, eyes like gravel, he looked older than expected. Ross played the recording from the thumb drive. Halden didn't flinch. "Got nothing to say?" she asked. He shrugged. "Your late should have come 2 years ago." "You knew kids were involved," Taylor snapped. Halden's eyes twitched. "That's where I draw the line. I did business. I didn't order blood." Ross stepped closer. "We have enough to charge you with conspiracy, smuggling, and obstruction." Halden stepped back. "I'm not fighting," he said, "but I want to say one thing." Ross raised an eyebrow. He looked past her toward the trees. "Everything starts when people feel forgotten. That's when they start taking what doesn't belong to them." Then he held out his wrists. Back at the Monroe cabin, Ellie sat by the fire with a notebook in her lap and Bolt snoring at her feet. She sketched the sheriff's badge, a map of the woods, and Bolt leaping over a fallen log. When Noah came in carrying 2 mugs of hot apple cider, he asked, "You writing the whole thing down?" Ellie nodded. "So I don't forget." He handed her a mug. "That's how you make sense of hard things. You give them a shape." "Will there be more bad people?" she asked. Noah thought for a moment. "Probably. Will we always find them? Maybe not first, but eventually. Yeah, because the good ones don't quit." She smiled at Bolt, who lifted his head at the sound of her voice. "He never quits." Noah tapped his mug against hers. "To finding the trail." 2 weeks later, the town held its first fall festival in 3 years. No police tape, no fire warnings, no road closures. There were hay rides, a pie contest, and a giant wooden statue of Bolt that made Ellie laugh. The mayor gave a forgettable speech, but everyone remembered what came after. Ellie stood on a small wooden stage beside Sheriff Ross, holding a ribbon reading "Honorary Trail Scout." She smiled, tucked a hand into Bolt's collar, and waved. Bolt sat nearby, tail thumping, eyes bright, ever watchful. Months passed. Larks Ridge settled back into rhythm. Wendell Briggs entered witness protection. Grant Taylor returned to limited duty, teaching recruits and walking lighter than he used to. And though the woods never fully stopped whispering, Ellie, Noah, and Bolt knew they'd left their mark, and that some trails, no matter how dark, always led home. Sheriff Ross announced she'd be stepping down next spring, leaving the town in capable hands, and Noah Monroe found a quieter rhythm. He began teaching wilderness safety at the local high school and writing short essays, a blog, small pieces that let the past settle. But every morning, without fail, he walked the woods, and Bolt was always at his side. One late evening, as the last of the snow melted from the ridge, Ellie stood at the tree line where the forest met the back of their property. The sun dipped behind the hills, painting clouds in shades of orange and purple. In her hand, she held something familiar, an old sheriff's radio, cleaned, rewired, and connected to a fresh battery. "Dad said it still works," she told Bolt. He sat beside her, ears perked. Pressing the button, she spoke clearly. "This is Scout 1. All clear on the ridge. Standing by." Static crackled, then a voice answered, steady and warm. "Copy that, Scout 1. You keep that trail safe." Bolt barked once. For the first time in a long while, everything felt right. This story is about courage, loyalty, second chances, and the quiet power of one girl, one father, and one unforgettable dog. Now it's your turn. Have you ever had a moment when someone you love helped guide you back when everything felt lost? Share your story. We'd love to hear it.